Okay, we can proceed now to group 3. Is it presented? Group 3. Wonderful, right? Left one, right sub diode.
Good morning, students. Good morning, teacher. My name is Kalkira Mandafro. I'm from Group 3, and I'm going to present about the critical thinking, meaning, standard, and principle of critical thinking. So we would like to acknowledge our logic instructor, Mr. Mohammed Zainu, who gives us such a guidance assignment, the importance of logical reasoning in our real-life reasoning to teach students how to think and how able to think intensively and rationally. So when we come to this presentation, we are going to see the objective, introduction, standard of critical thinking, and principle of good arguments, principle of critical thinking, and then we will finish with the summary. When we come to the objective, critical thinking is what a college education is all about. In many high schools, the educational system emphasized tends to be on lower ordering thinking. Students are simply expected to passively absorb information and then repeat it back on tests. In college, by contrast, the emphasis is on the fostering higher order thinking, the active, intelligent evaluation of ideas and information. General objective of critical thinking is to teach students how to think rather than what to think. That is how to become independent, rational, well-reasoned, self-direct thinkers and learners. Specific objective is to arrive at well-reasoned, considered, and justifiable. And when you come to the introduction, meaning, significant, and definition of critical thinking, first, what comes to your mind when you hear the word critical thinking?
Repeat the question, please.
What is critical thinking?
I think critical thinking is way of analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating arguments and evidence to come up with a judgmental and rational decision.
Yes. The word critical means in a dictionary negative and fault finding. Also, it means thinking clearly and intelligently. Critical means involve or exercising skill, judgment, or observations. In this sense, critical thinking means thinking clearly and intelligently. More precise, critical thinking is the general term given to a wide range of cognitive skills and intellectual dispositions needed to effectively identify, analyze, and evaluate arguments and the truth claims. It's a process or journey that helps us to arrive at the most useful, helpful, and most likely destinations when evaluating claims for a scientific truth. There are standards of critical thinking. Critical thinking is a disciplined thinking governed by clear intellectual standards, but not every thinking is critical. To identify critical thinking from the uncritical, we refer to some standards. There is a consensus among philosophers that for thinking to be critical, it has to meet certain standards. Standards of critical thinking refers to a condition or a level that critical thinking should meet to be considered as a normal and acceptable. Among the most of these intellectual standards are clarity, precision, accuracy, relevance, consistency, logical correctness, completeness, and fairness. To identify a critical thinking from uncertainty, we refer to some standards. The first one is clarity. It refers to a clear understanding of concepts and clearly expressing them in a language that is free of obscurity and vagueness. It's a gateway understanding. If the statement is unclear, we cannot determine whether it is accurate or relevant. This is because lack of clarity due to laziness, carelessness, or a lack of skill. For example, we can ask if the argument or the statement is not clear. We can ask, could you elaborate further? And the second standard of critical thinking is precision. As a matter of being exact, accurate, and careful, most ideas are vague and obscure, though we think we have precise understanding of them. So to get understanding, we should pay close attention to details. Everyone recognizes the importance of precision in specialized fields such as medicine, mathematics, architecture, and engineering. For example, we can ask ourselves, could you be more specific if we are the one who is critical thinker? The third one is accuracy. It's about correctness or getting true information. If the ideas and thoughts of one process are not real, then one decisions based on wrong and false information will likely to result in distorting realities. The fourth one is relevance. It's a question of connections. When there's a discussion or a debate, it should focus on relevant ideas and communication. A favorite debater's trick is to try to distract an audience's attention by raising on irrelevant issues. In critical thinking, doesn't collect any information. Instead, they conduct relevance by logical connections. We can ask ourselves, how does that relate to the problem? And the fifth one is consistency. It's about the quality of always behaving in a way or having the same opinion or standards. Logic tells us that if a person holds inconsistent beliefs, at least one of those beliefs must be false. For example, you can't say that Mr. Alan is the murderer and he's not guilty for the murder at the same time. And in the consistency, there are two kinds of inconsistency that should be avoided. The first one is logical inconsistency or irrationality, which involves things that cannot both or all be true about a particular matter. The second one is particular inconsistency, which involves saying one thing and doing another. Critical thinking helps us become aware of such unconscious practical inconsistencies, allowing us to deal with them on a conclusion and rational basis. And another name for practical inconsistency is hypocrisy. The sixth one is logical correctness. To think logically is to reason correctly, that is, to draw well-founded conclusions that are accurate and well-supported from the belief we hold. For example, so you say that you like reading. Here in this campus, people like you have enough friends, so you should change your mind. The seventh one is completeness, means that deep and thoughts, thinking, and evaluation has been exercised, and shallow and superficial thoughts and criticism avoided. For example, the statement "do more with less" is often used when finalizing facility budgets. The eighth standard of critical thinking is fairness. Critical thinking needs that our thinking to be fair, open-minded, impartial, and free of distorting biases and preconceptions. Fairness implies the treating of all relevant viewpoints alike without reference to one's own feeling or interests. There are codes of intellectual conduct for effective discussion. The basic codes of intellectual conduct, especially the common principle of a good argument, as well as that of critical thinking. The first principle of good argument is the structural principle. The good structural argument requires that one who argues against a position should use an argument that meets the fundamental structural requirements of a well-formed argument. The first criterion used in determining whether an argument is a good one is the requirement that it's be structurally sound. The conclusion either follows necessarily from its premise in the case of deductive argument, and the conclusion follows probably from its premise in case of inductive argument. The second principle of a good argument is the relevance principle. The second principle of a good argument that requires that one who presents an argument for or against a position should set fourth, only reasons whose truth provides some evidence for the truth of the conclusion. So it must be relevant to that conclusion. A premise is relevant if its acceptance provides some reason to believe, counts in favor of, or has some bearing on the truth of the merit of the conclusion. A premise is relevant if its acceptance has no bearing on, provides no evidence for, or has no connection to the truth or merit of the conclusion. And the third one is whether a premise is relevant, we ask two questions. The first one is, would the premise being true in any way make one more likely to believe that the conclusion is true? And the second one is, if the premise is true, should it be consideration in the determination of whether or not the conclusion of argument is true or not? The third principle of good argument is the acceptability principle. The third principle of this principle requires an argument for or against a position should provide reasons that are likely to be accepted by a mature or a rational person. The fourth is the sufficiency principle. It requires that one who presents an argument for or against a position should attempt to provide relevant and acceptable reasons of the right kind that together are sufficient in a number and weight to justify the acceptance of the conclusion. The fifth is the rebuttal principle. It's the last principle of a good argument. On this principle, an argument should be with effective rebuttals all anticipated serious criticism that may be brought against it. And the next topic will be principle of critical thinking. And the first principle of critical thinking, the first one is the fallibility principle. Each participant in a discussion of a dispute issue should be willing to accept the fact he or she is imperfect. One must acknowledge that one's own initial view may not be the most defensible position on the question. And the second one is the truth-seeking principle. Each participant should be committed to the task of seriously searching for the truth. The third one is the clarity principle. It requires that the formulation of all position, defense, and attack should be free of any kind of linguistic confusions and clearly separated from other positions and issues. The fourth one is the burden of proof principle. This principle requires that the burden of a proof for any position usually rests on the participants who set forth the position. And the fifth one is the principle of charity. If a participant argument is reformulated by an opponent, it should be carefully expressed in its strongest possible version of that is consistent with that what is believed to be the original intention of the arguer. And the sixth one is the suspension of a judgment principle. This principle requires that if no position is defended by a good argument, if two or more positions seem to be defended with equal strength, one should suspend judgment about the issue. The seventh one is the resolution principle. It's an issue should be considered resolved if the argument is structurally sound, uses relevant and acceptable reasons, and provides sufficient grounds to justify the conclusion and include an effective rebuttal to all serious criticism and or the position it supports. So when we come to the summary, critical thinking is a process hopefully leads to an impartial investigation of data and facts that remains not swayed by irrelevant emotions. As a part of logic, critical thinking also teaches us what logical principles as rational being should follow in right reasoning. So if you want to further information, you can check logical and critical thinking module, our module, the fourth edition of critical thinking, and www.criteriacorner.com. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions.
Much eloquent, very good. And one extra strength of her presentation is she what? Keeps eye contact. Right? Eye contact is very important, right? Unlike the previous presenter, she keeps eye contact in addition to her strength. Yes, very important. Nice. Group 3. ቅድስት አትናቴዎስ that matters. Tell me what you understand from your paper, from your presentation, from your assignment.
The importance of critical thinking and the standards to evaluate critical thinking and to identify fallacies and reality of evidences or informations.
What's the fundamental meaning of critical thinking and its importance in various aspects of life?
Critical thinking is analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating information to get a logical and rational decisions. And its importance to make a critical decision, to effectively problem solve, and intellectual growth in academic.
Second question is can you give real life example that demonstrate the application of critical thinking principle in decision-making process?
Like a lawyer and a judge use critical thinking for evaluating evidences and interpreting law and making decision in court, and logical reasoning ensure a fair judgment.
ቃል ኪዳን አለማየ ቃል ኪዳን አለማየ ቃል ኪዳን tell me in a nutshell what you understand from your assignment.
Okay. From our assignment, I understand that critical thinking means thinking intelligently or clearly without any blind judgmental. We have to be we have to think, especially in college. In college, we understand that how to think, how able to think critically. This is it.
Can you mention some standards of critical thinking?
Okay, some standard of critical thinkings are clarity, preciseness, accuracy, and also there are so many. Okay. Logical correctness, completeness, consistency, so many.
Can you provide real life examples that demonstrate the application of critical thinking principle in decision-making process?
Okay. For example, in our class, we by our logic lecture, we asked about some issue, and maybe my answer will be not well logically reasoned. So using my I have to avoid this situation by using critical thinking. I can make a critical judgment about that issue.
Okay, in your presentation, the presenter mentioned type of inconsistencies.
Yes.
Can you mention them?
Okay. The first one is logical inconsistent, and the second one is partial inconsistence, by other name known as hypocrisy.
Tell me to understand.
I understand how critical thinking can be important when you are dealing with different kinds of arguments from different kinds of people. You can identify which argument is correct, and you can identify reliable information from people.
Can you mention standards or principles of critical thinking?
Consistency, I can say consistency. If you are not consistent with your argument, it cannot be reliable sometimes. You can also mention the reliability and your presentation of your argument can be some factors to identify which critical thinker is better than the other.
How does the principle of critical thinking guide individual in analyzing information and making some judgments?
Some principles in critical thinking can guide you into forming good arguments. Sometimes when you hear information from the news and information, some health information, you can identify which ones are correct and which ones are reliable using critical thinking skills. Principles. Yeah.
Can you mention once again what is the principle of critical thinking?
For example, you can identify, like you can use the principle of inconsistency if an argument is not inconsistent. If it's inconsistent, you can identify that it's wrong, probably
What are
wrong.
other principles? Consistency one.
Consistency one. Soundness.
Not soundness. What's the type of inconsistency?
Logical inconsistency when and practical inconsistency. When
Can you explain the difference?
logical inconsistency is when you say something that's different from the other the second time you say it. And practical inconsistency is when you say something and you do something else.
ከፍ ያለው ቱሉ ከፍ ያለው ከፍ ያለው tell me what you understand from the paper.
Well, at the first, yes, well, I understand a lot of things from this presentation. The first, the importance of critical thinking in the various aspects of life, the standards or criteria to identify critical thinking from uncritical thinking, how the critical thinking, the principle of critical thinking, how the
Elementary principles of critical thinking. What are the principles of critical thinking?
Yes, the principle of critical thinking. Yes, the principle of critical thinking guide individuals in analyzing information, making some judgment by encouraging them to question assumption, seeking evidence, consider multiple perspective, value credibility, apply logical reasoning.
What are the real life example? Can you give me real life example that demonstrate the application?
Yes, there is a lot of importance of critical thinking in the process of making. Yes, in the process of making sound decision in real life. Among them, for example, when evaluating.
Meaning of critical thinking and key standard of critical thinking that requires one thinking is critical and important aspect of in our real life. For example, fallibility principle, truth-seeking principle, singularity principle, and burden of proof principle, the principle of charity. Burden of principle when an arguer is proves their evidence. የራሱን የሚያከራክረውን ነገር መረጃውን በስነ ስርዓት ማቅረብ አለበት። burden ማለት ሪስፖንሲቢሊቲ of an arguer. Logical inconsistency and practical inconsistency. Logical inconsistency means cannot both all true in matter of practical or hypocrisy is saying another, doing another.
Father, your ID number? 7? ቀና ጌታቸው ቀና ነው። ቀና tell me what you understand from your paper from your assignment.
I understood from our assignment that critical thinking is one of the most important things we use in our day-to-day lives, and that it's an intellectually disciplinary process of skillfully analyzing and evaluating information so that it can guide us in making better choices.
Nice. Can you provide real life examples that demonstrate the application of critical thinking in decision making process?
Okay, for example, a business manager, he evaluates the market and he studies the strategies of other competitors, and so this helps him make. How do I say this? Helps him make educated guess and calculated risk and data, and it helps him make more effective decisions and rational decisions.
Can you mention principles of critical thinking? Mention principles.
Okay. Relevance, acceptability, and standard. Yeah, those are the ones I remember.
What else? What are the type of inconsistencies?
Inconsistencies, partial inconsistency and logical inconsistency.
Okay, what is the fundamental meaning of critical thinking and its importance in various aspects of life?
Yeah, it's intellectually disciplined process of skillfully evaluating and assessing information.
Its importance?
That's important in rational problem-solving skills and rational decision-making.
Kausar Gabayo. Kausar Gabayo, tell me when to start from your side.
Understand the meaning, the importance, and the criteria that's needed to call critical thinking.
What are the key standards or criteria used to assess the quality of critical thinking?
Clarity, accuracy, precision, fairness, and relevance, and logical correctness.
What does fairness mean?
Fairness means considering the different viewpoints, and there may be a lot of viewpoints, so considering that viewpoints is called fairness.
Differentiate between logical inconsistency and practical inconsistency.
Logical consistency, practical consistency is saying something and doing different thing. That's what we call it, practical consistency. And when it comes to logical consistency, saying different things. Logical correct saying different things, or what I mean, contradiction. That's contradiction is called logical consistency. Contradiction of arguments, or what we say, what we preach, and when it contradicts.
Kalam ulat. Kalam Shay.
Okay, from the assignment, for me, critical thinking is the ability of an individual to give an answer after viewing that question, that statement or argument in so many ways and possibilities, and giving an answer that is backed with logic and truth.
What are the principles of critical thinking?
The principles of critical thinking is viewing that question in lots of perspectives and giving a statement.
Can you provide real life example that demonstrate application of critical thinking in decision process?
Real life examples, you can say, for example, after viewing a news, you don't have to give any view with one view. You have to view that news by so many ways and directions to give proper information to other peoples, or to give a conclusion to that thing.
Differentiate between logical inconsistency and practical inconsistency.
With what?
what's the difference between logical inconsistency and practical inconsistency?
I think logical consistency is viewing things by truthfulness or with evidence and proof. But the other one is by just emotion or something.
Calibration. Tell me what you understand from
critical thinking is a multicultural cognitive process that involves like curiosity, humility, empathy.
Some principles of critical thinking.
By encouraging to seek avoiding logical and emotional reasoning and applying logical reasoning.
The principle of good argument.
Good argument.
What are the key standards or criteria used to assess the quality of critical thinking?
Accuracy, precision, logic, fairness.
What's the difference between accuracy and precision?